I don't know exactly when my mother stopped being herself. Maybe it was when we first stepped inside that house. Maybe before. Maybe long after. But deep down, I knew something was wrong the moment we passed through the rusted gate that separated us from the outside world. It was the summer of 1966. My father had inherited an old farmhouse on the outskirts of Columbiana, rural Ohio. The house had stood empty for nearly 20 years, ever since the mysterious death of his uncle, Jeremiah Miller, a reclusive man who reportedly lost his mind during his final years. The house was 2 stories tall, built of weathered wood, its windows blanketed in dust, the roof sagging. It looked like it was breathing. And as absurd as that sounds, I swear to you, the place seemed to pulse as if it were alive and hungry, waiting for new flesh. My parents were enchanted. I was not. And my sister Emily, well, she was only 7. Too young to understand what my instincts were screaming. We should never have come here. The first days were quiet. Too quiet. My father claimed it was just the house adjusting. That every old home has a voice. Creaking floorboards, popping walls, windows that slammed from the wind. But there was no wind. The trees around the house stood motionless. The abandoned fields didn't sway. The collapsed barn to the south made no sound day or night. Yet we heard the knocks. On the first day they came from upstairs. On the second, the basement. On the third, the attic. Emily was the first to change. She used to be such a cheerful little girl, full of life. But there, inside the Miller house, her energy drained away. She would stand staring at the walls as if listening to something inside them. She began talking to herself. And the most disturbing part, she started drawing strange symbols on torn-out notebook pages. A circle. 3 lines. A bleeding eye. My mother thought it was just her imagination. My father blamed scary movies. But I knew, those weren't the drawings of a child. The nights grew worse. Doors opened on their own. Lights flickered even though my father had just installed a new generator. The radio would catch whispers, voices speaking in unknown languages. And Emily started referring to herself in the third person. Emily's not here now. You're talking to the lady in the window. One night I awoke to the sound of nails being pulled out of wood. The clock read 3:16 a.m. Always the same time. I crept down the stairs, heart pounding. My father was passed out on the couch, a whiskey bottle tipped over on the floor. My mother stood in front of the lit fireplace, staring into the flames with hollow eyes. But it wasn't the fire that had her mesmerized, it was the floor. She was holding a kitchen knife, broad and sharp, and slowly dragging its tip between the floorboards. "They're whispering, always whispering," she murmured. "Mom?" I asked, a cold shiver crawling up my spine. She didn't answer. She only smiled. A smile that wasn't hers. The next day, a pastor from the neighboring town showed up uninvited. Said he'd had a dream about the house. Said he saw shadows hovering above the roof and figures watching through the windows. He brought a Bible and a silver crucifix. "This house must be sealed," he declared, glancing nervously in every direction. "There's something ancient here. Something awakened." My parents laughed it off. But Emily, she looked at him and said in the voice of an old woman, "You have no power here." That night, the pastor had an accident. His car veered off the road without explanation. The police found bloody handprints inside the vehicle, but no one else was there. He died in the hospital, murmuring something in Latin. In the attic, we found Jeremiah's journal. It had been hidden beneath a loose floorboard, along with small animal bones, melted candles, and a mask made of leather and thorns. The journal was pure madness. But among the incoherent ramblings, the bloodstains, and the torn pages, we uncovered something horrific. He had belonged to a cult. A group called the Silencers of the Light. Men and women who believed that by embracing absolute darkness, they could commune with entities from beyond. Nameless beings. Formless. Just presence. They offered sacrifices. Rituals. Invocations. The house was an altar. And my sister, a vessel. The night everything peaked, the house trembled. The lights died. The walls bled a thick black substance. Voices whispered in every ear, in every language, yet all said the same thing. Open the flesh. Release the soul. Emily was missing from her room. My mother found her first, floating in the attic, eyes rolled back, arms spread like a cross. Symbols were carved into her skin. She spoke in a tongue that pulled at your mind like something ancient and parasitic. My father rushed toward her but was flung against the wall by an invisible force. 2 of his ribs snapped. I tried to pray but my mouth wouldn't move. The house roared. The ground split. Reality shattered. It was my mother who ended it. For the first time since it all began, she returned to herself. She grabbed the crucifix the pastor had left on our couch, his last act, and pressed it against Emily's chest. Emily screamed. Not like a child. Not like a human. It was a shriek that rose from the depths of the earth. Part of the house collapsed that night. The attic caught fire without cause. The walls. I swear they laughed, and the symbols vanished as Emily fell unconscious to the floor. We left that very night. Emily remembers nothing. And maybe that's a mercy. My mother hasn't spoken since. Not a single word. But her eyes say everything. She saw. She felt. She knows. My father died 3 years later, drowned in alcohol and nightmares. And me? I still dream of that house. I wake every night at 3:16. I hear knocks in the walls. I see figures in my windows. And sometimes I hear a child's voice whisper. The lady in the window is still here, waiting. Some people say that evil resides in big cities. But those of us who grew up in small towns know better. It's there that it hides best. Where no one expects it. Where everything seems calm, peaceful, and every soul knows each other by name, even the ones that shouldn't be there. I was 16 when I met Gracie Lynn. It was the summer of 1989 in the small town of Belle Rive, deep in the humid and forgotten heart of Louisiana. A town that seemed stuck in time with its peeling wooden houses, suffocating swamps, and its stained glass church that opened religiously on Wednesdays and Sundays. Gracie arrived suddenly. She came with her mother, a frail and silent woman who claimed to be a nurse. No one knew where they came from. The only thing everyone agreed on was that they were running away from something, or someone. At school, Gracie was the type of girl who attracted attention without trying. Pale, with long dark hair and eyes so green they seemed unnatural. It was as if the world around her was always just a little out of focus. As if she carried a piece of night within her. And perhaps she did. It all began the day she disappeared for an entire afternoon. They said she was last seen walking alone through the old cemetery, a forgotten place at the end of the road where the gravestones were covered in moss and no one had been buried since 1940. When she returned, something about her had changed. The way she looked at people, the way she spoke, even the way she walked. Gracie started muttering softly as if she were talking to someone invisible. Teachers began to notice her essays filled with morbid themes, and the local reverend even whispered that her eyes no longer belonged to a child. And then came the deaths. The first was the sheriff's dog. Found with its eyes ripped out, no blood left in its body. Then Mr. Higgs, the town librarian. He fell from the stairs, but what the medical examiner couldn't explain was the burned symbol on his chest, a circle cut by 3 vertical lines. The same symbol Gracie had been scribbling in the margins of her notebooks. The town began to talk. Whispers in the stores. Longer prayers at church. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew. Something was wrong with the girl. That's when my mother, who was the local history teacher, decided to investigate. In the basement of the old school, among moldy files and records from the past century, she found a name. Loa Tebow. An ancient spirit summoned by forgotten voodoo cults, described as the whisperer between worlds. A spirit that, according to old legends, could possess the bodies of children who visited the dead without spiritual protection. And then it all made sense. Gracie, the cemetery, the symbol, the voices she heard. This wasn't just a psychological imbalance. It was possession. My mother tried to warn the town. She went to see the reverend. She spoke to the police. She showed them everything she found. But no one believed her. Voodoo and spirits are just superstition, they said. This girl just needs a therapist. That night, my mother woke up in the middle of the night to find Gracie standing in front of our house. She didn't knock. She didn't call out. She just stood there, staring, motionless, with eyes darker than the night itself. Minutes later, my mother began vomiting blood. She was rushed to the hospital and survived. But she never slept again without a knife under her pillow. Things got out of control by the end of August. Gracie disappeared again. But this time she didn't come back the same. When they found her, she was in the church, completely naked, surrounded by black candles and animal bones. She was speaking in a language no one understood, her voice hoarse and deep beyond the capacity of a teenage body. She kept screaming a name over and over, Loa Tebow. Loa Tebow. Loa Tebow. The reverend tried to approach. He was thrown against the stone columns. 3 ribs were broken. He never preached again. Gracie was sent to the Baton Rouge Psychiatric Hospital. Diagnosis: severe psychosis with mystical delusions. But I know what I saw. The girl they locked up, wasn't Gracie anymore. A few weeks later, the hospital caught fire. All the patients were evacuated. Except one. Gracie Lynn's body was never found. Her medical records disappeared. The doctors involved in the case died in strange accidents in the following 2 years. And as for the town? Belle Rive was never the same. The church was closed. The cemetery was sealed with concrete. And no one speaks of the summer of 1989. It's as if time itself is ashamed of what happened. But I remember her eyes. The symbol. The whisper she made in the mornings at school, as if someone was always speaking in her ear. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I see a girl standing in front of my window. She doesn't knock. She just watches. And smiles. They say a house speaks to you the moment you step inside. I didn't believe that until we moved into that house. It was the winter of 2004 when my family moved to a small town in Connecticut. The house was old, much older than anything I'd ever seen. The kind of house you could feel in your bones. The kind that made you hold your breath when you walked through its halls as if it were alive. Cedar Hill, a name that, over time, would become synonymous with darkness. We had no idea what we were walking into. The house was a 2-story Victorian, built in the early 1900s. It had a tall, creaking staircase and windows that seemed to watch you no matter where you were in the house. We'd been living in the city for years, and moving here was supposed to be a fresh start, away from the noise, away from the chaos. But what we didn't know was that the quiet of Cedar Hill hid something much darker. From the moment we moved in, I noticed it. The air was thicker here, heavier. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like the house was breathing, like it was pulling me into its depths. The basement was the worst. I always avoided it, as did my parents. But I could feel it calling to me, whispering my name when the house fell into its usual eerie silence at night. My father, despite his stoic demeanor, was wary of the place. My mother, on the other hand, always made excuses to avoid going down there. Then one evening I heard something I'll never forget. It was late, maybe around 1:15 a.m. I was in bed, the covers pulled tightly around me, trying to sleep. The house creaked as usual, the wind howling against the walls. But then I heard something different. A soft thumping. It was coming from below, from the basement. At first, I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the house settling. But the sound continued, rhythmic, like someone, or something, was pacing back and forth. A whisper followed the sound, too faint for me to understand. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see what was going on. I slowly crept out of bed and made my way to the stairs. The house felt colder as I descended, the air thick with an unnatural chill. The basement door stood at the bottom, dark and silent. But I could feel something waiting behind it, watching me. I reached for the doorknob, and as my hand touched it, the thumping stopped. The silence was suffocating. The first time I ventured into the basement, I didn't see much. It was filled with old furniture, broken appliances, and boxes of things left behind by the previous owners. But there was something about the corner where the light from the single bulb never seemed to reach. A thick shadow lingered there, moving in unnatural ways. That night, I didn't dare approach the corner. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was down there, something that had been waiting for years to be noticed. Over the following days, strange things started happening. Items in the house were moved around, but not in the usual way. It was as if someone had been searching for something. Sometimes I'd wake up and find my bedroom door wide open, even though I'd locked it before going to bed. One night, I found a message scratched into the wall next to my bed. "They're coming for you." At first, I thought it was just my imagination. But then I began hearing the whispers more clearly, and I knew they weren't in my head. They came from the basement. Every night, without fail, the same soft thumping, the same words, whispered in a language I didn't understand. One evening, my curiosity got the better of me. I went down into the basement again. This time, I brought a flashlight with me. As I stepped down into the darkness, the temperature seemed to drop even more. My breath came out in visible puffs, and I could feel the air pressing against me as if something were closing in. The shadows in the corner seemed to writhe, stretching and pulling toward me. I shined my flashlight in that direction, and what I saw made my heart stop. At first, it looked like a figure, a tall, thin figure with no face. Its body seemed to be made of shadows, its form shifting and flickering in the dim light. Then it spoke. "I've been waiting for you." From that moment on, the house was never the same. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. My parents started acting differently. My father, who was always calm and collected, began to stay up late, pacing the house with a nervous energy. My mother seemed distant, like she was no longer fully present. The light in her eyes was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. I knew what they had been hiding. They had seen it too. The entity in the basement, the thing that wasn't human that never had been. The final night came without warning. The whispers turned into shrill screams. The thumping was deafening. I could hear it coming from every direction, closing in on me. I tried to run, but the house had already ensnared me. The walls seemed to close in and the air grew thick, making it hard to breathe. My parents were nowhere to be found. The basement door slammed shut in front of me, trapping me inside. And then I saw it. The figure. Its form had fully emerged, no longer a shadow but a twisted, grotesque creature. Its eyes were wide and empty, its mouth stretched open in a silent scream. It reached for me with long, gnarled hands. When I woke up the next morning, I was lying on the floor in the basement, the sunlight creeping in through the small window at the top of the stairs. I don't remember how I got there or how much time had passed. But I know one thing, the house is still alive. The entity is still there, waiting, watching, and whispering my name. And if I ever leave, it will follow me.